I am here today with Scott Kisting, who is the Senior Vice President for Midwest Underground Technologies. This is the closest place to campus that has a real live, huge windmill. And they have been kind enough to allow us to talk about it, to see how it was constructed. And we are here on a windy day. So how much power are you making today, Scott?
Well, right now we're at 102.5 kilowatts that we're producing on the wind turbine, and you can see the wind turbine itself is feeding our facility. We are, because we're in production today and we've got everybody working. We're actually consuming a little bit from the utility. Throughout the day, Mr. Pondell, who's here as well with us, he keeps monitoring things, and he'll tell you there's times in the day when he can tell when people are working or not. It's an indicator.
I love it. I love it.
When Todd's seeing us feeding back to the utility during the workday, we go,
Yeah.
But one of the things that happens is it's active whenever there's more than a 7-mile-an-hour wind.
Okay.
So like at night or on a weekend where we don't have a lot going on, we're feeding back into the utility grid.
Okay.
So Midwest Underground Technology, this is something that we've done to help schools, universities, others, as we put these in place for them.
Sure. Now, we've talked about before that the power a windmill predates is proportional to the speed of the wind cubed. So 7 miles an hour doesn't get you anywhere near that 100 kilowatts.
No, it doesn't. We need to be somewhere, some of it's the speed, some of it's the direction as well.
Okay.
And the turbine orientating on it, so as it does that. But somewhere in that 30 to 35 mile an hour, I believe, Todd, is where we see the maximum proficiency. Power. It'll run up to 57 miles an hour and then it protects itself and needs to be at that 7 mile an hour to even be turning, because it's just not worthwhile for it to turn if it's below that.
Sure. No, I fully understand that. So this is great. So when you have a really windy 30 mile an hour wind, and we'll be going outside and you'll see 30 mile an hour, it's pretty windy today.
You'll look here on the shelter pier. When we get out there, or I keep saying shelter, tower pier, you'll actually notice that in the pad itself, it's designed with the anchors where the pad itself below ground is 28 foot by 28 foot by 7 foot below the ground. The pad is 4 foot thick. It actually has 3 foot of aggregate on top of it, and then the portion of the pier that sticks up for the tower is actually 10 foot by 10 foot by 3 foot.
And you all understand why this has to happen. You know how tall these are and how they're actually intercepting the force of the wind, right? So there's an enormous torque. And these towers, this is why they don't fall over.
Yeah, it's called an overturning moment. What we're dealing with is we're dealing with uplift and shear. And so there's two basic foundations designed. This would be called the pad and pier type foundation design. The other would be a caisson design, and that's where we'll drill holes. We do the same thing with our telecommunications structures. So we've got a choice to make in the foundation. We take soil samples, and then what's taken in the soil sample, if you stop here, Todd, we had to do soil drilling. So we had to drill down. The reason that we drilled down, we had to know what the compressive strength was of that soil. The 4,000 PSI, is it 5,000, is it 8,000? That helps us then to go back and design what we need for a foundation. On this one, we were able to do a pad and pier. On some of them, we'll just do a caisson. We had one with a caisson that was 7 feet in diameter, over 70 feet deep.
70 feet you had to go.
Okay, so that's where we bring out a drill rig. And imagine drilling a 7-foot hole 70 feet in the ground. Well, you get water that comes in. And then what we have to do is we have to sleeve the hole and use what's called a trimmy chute, because you can't have aggregate separate from the concrete. It removes the strength. So the trimmy chute goes to the very bottom of the hole. Concrete starts to pour through the chute. And as they start bringing that trimmy chute up, as the concrete fills, they bring the trimmy chute up in line with the concrete filling so that the aggregate doesn't separate from the concrete. Because if you separate your aggregate from the concrete, you're going to lose your strength in your concrete.
Wow.
So this one here was 127 yards of concrete, about 508,000 pounds of concrete in the ground there. Kind of put in perspective, I don't know how you guys grab the 80-pound bags of concrete that you go to Lowe's. You'd be looking at about 5,700 bags sitting there to mix up.
That's without the aggregate.
Without the rock. Aggregate's gravel, by the way, folks. So how much of your business, at least, was building these types of towers for windmills?
The highest percentage, I would say, was no more than 10%.
Okay.
Telecommunications is the focus that we really have as our organization. The trends and the disciplines, go forward a couple of pictures. So if you take a look, back up one. If you take a look at this, This is the pole design here. This is a slip joint pole. We'll use a similar pole design for telecommunications to go ahead and support the infrastructure for your cell phone. So we make your cell phone work. So it's a natural extension of what our abilities already are.
Okay. Obviously, these things have to be much more sturdy since they're intercepting wind.
Yeah, we've got a fatigue moment. We're actually working with we and some of the others. I sit on the TIA committee, and what we're doing is we're incorporating into TIA 222H, which is the structural standard, the fatigue moment as we look at this, because one of the things we're talking about with wind turbines is taking some of the existing telecommunication structures and understanding how to put a turbine on it. As a matter of fact, we've got one design out there now. If you think about it, it's two steel ring halos that go around the outside of the tower, and the turbine will be on the outside of that, will go all the way around the outside of the tower without impacting the actual structure. Because of that, though, we have to figure out what happens, because when you see the turbine, there's a tremendous amount, you use the word torque, that's imputed into the structure from that, and we have to understand what that's going to do, because now we're creating a fatigue moment that's outside of what's normal for a telecommunications structure.
So just flipping down through some of these, you'll see the guys were out there working, getting the concrete put in place. You'll see the anchors, threaded anchor rods there. This one in particular has 100 anchor rods that are 1 1/8 in diameter. Then we're getting into this section. This windmill happens to be 3 different sections in there. The overall height of it is 122 foot to the center of the turbine and 158 foot to the peak. It's got a 70-foot diameter of the span of the propeller, the prop.
The blade. So stop right there. So this is what we call the pinch point. You got to line up all those bolts with all the holes inside. If they're not set up just right, and that's where shooting the foundation becomes critical. So what we do is we actually have a template for when we're putting the foundation in. I'm assuming you want the construction detail.
Sure.
So we actually have a steel template that goes on this, and there's another one in the concrete itself. We'll put a template on here, and then we'll shoot that with a transit to make sure that the template's true and plumb. Because if we've got that out at all, you can't just take a hammer and hit a few bolts to line it up. So that's one of the tricky parts of it. You've got to make sure you line up all your bolts from your setting.
Yeah, that seems like really hard.
Another neat aspect about those threaded rods there, where the bolts go on there, they're actually in a sleeve going down through the concrete that allows, when you torque that down, they'll actually stretch and expand a portion of the load.
Post tension.
If there's any photos you want me to stop at, otherwise I'll kind of flip through here. You'll see the build.
So the point Todd's talking about with the post-tensioning of the anchor bolts, that's different than what we do with telecommunication structures, and the reason for that is the fatigue moment that your instructor was talking about. We have to take that into account, and that's why we do that. If you want to talk
There's a
about
lot that goes into building a tower. And you need a big enough crane that's tall enough to get the...
crane and or gin pole.
Wow. Now, who makes the generator system? Did you guys?
This one is a Northwinds unit. Okay. The big downside to it is it doesn't allow you to store power.
Right.
But the upside to it, it's a direct drive unit, which very little maintenance. What do we do, about $3,500 a year maintenance cost, Todd?
Yes.
So low maintenance, direct drive. It orientates itself on the wind. It knows when to shut itself down because the wind speed's too low, and it doesn't want to have stress on it from a maintenance standpoint. And
too high as well.
High, it just locks itself in and bears down for the storm.
Yeah, I think at 58 miles per hour, if it exceeds that for over a minute's time, it'll actually go into a shutdown. And it does require, I think, up to 7 miles per hour wind to actually get it
7 to 58. Okay.
So there they're making the attachment.
And I hope there's a harness on that guy up there.
Yep, 100%, 100%. So we have a 100 rule in our organization, and that is if you're off the ground at any height at all, you're 100% attached. You cannot leave the ground without a means of being 100% attached.
You'll see when we go out there and look at the base of the tower there, it's got safety climbs on the ladders when you're going up. When you get up there, it's got points where you always tie your harness off to, the lanyards. And I think here...
This is really cool, being able to see this construction process, because I think a lot of times, oh yeah, it's a windmill, but to actually think about what does it take to put that up? And all the stuff that's under the ground first to support this, so it doesn't go...
Well, even the environmental pre-planning, because you've got SHPO requirements that apply, it's a soil boring, we're talking about the foundation design, the structure design. Some of the problems with wind turbines, if you pause here for a second, this flange you see up here, there have been issues. There's one that the flange actually suffered fatigue out in Kansas, and we had to help them with that because the pole itself wasn't designed for the overturn that was being put into it.
And now the length of this also has to get here on a truck somehow, right? So how long is this each section?
I don't remember the section heights on this one. How do you?
Each section was around 40 foot, I believe.
Yeah, and not much more. Usually
Can't get much more than that on a truck, right?
How long was the construction phase?
This one was, I think we finished it over the course of about a week and a half to 2 weeks.
Okay, let's talk about the wind.
Okay. You got your TV boot up? Look at what it's doing right now. Go to the current.
So currently right now you'll see, let me go back, it likes to keep flipping through there. Current status, we're looking at about a 30 mile per hour wind. Right around that 30 mile per hour mark really hits us right around that 100 kW mark. Throughout the day, I was watching a little bit yesterday and today, you'll see there's times where it's fully powering the facility along with actually going back and supplying the utility service.
So the flow will change.
Okay. Now, what about the economics of building this? How much should it cost to put up a... You guys got to pay for the installation yourself.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a benefit because with what we do in telecommunications, it's a similar skill set that's required to staff one of these towers. So we were able to do it in-house. We were somewhere in that $600,000 range in-house.
Okay. And how much is the turbine itself then?
What was our turbine cost? Did you pull that?
That I did not.
We'll have to pull that for you because I
Okay.
don't want to give you a number that's off.
Sure. Sure.
If you're looking at building one of these similar units, you're going to be in that $900,000 range.
Okay.
So we had the tax credits and other things that did. But the other thing is, Mr. Peters, the founder, this is why this is on here. Is if you take a look at this, we are concerned about the environment, and Mr. Peters wasn't just concerned with the economic reward.
Sure.
He was
Green power.
concerned with, you know, this is something that we have the ability to do. So he chose to do this because of what it did to help the environment, where we're at on things like that. Gives you a nice snapshot of the different things, just different graphical representations. He wanted people to see what it was doing for us.
Absolutely. And the fact that you don't have to buy electricity. Now, I imagine it's...
You still have to buy.
Right.
I just...
Don't have to buy as much.
I get to sell some back.
Okay.
So the advantage is I still have to buy it, but because of what Darren did, we get to sell it back.
Right.
Too.
I imagine you have to buy it at retail and you sell it at wholesale.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go into that. That's the power, so what you're referencing there, and it's something that's more than just a snapshot, that's actually a power purchase agreement.
Okay.
So that's an agreement that, depending on where you are, you have to be very careful with this, because it's different by state, even by region within a state, how the power purchase agreements would work. And rather than just give you a number on how that works, it's real important that people understand a power purchase agreement is a critical thing when evaluating a wind turbine, because you have to make sure how you're gonna be able to sell it back and what the
Absolutely.
requirements are.
Right, right.
So,
And of course, I believe the tax, the federal government was providing a 2.3 cents per kilowatt hour power purchase payback, right? And that expired, as I understand.
yes.
Yes, which is why they're no longer installing windmills all over the place.
Well, the wind turbines are still attractive for people that have a desire to do something, but if you're not doing it for the utility backbone and as part of some of those, it's really difficult to make the cost model work.
Yes.
You have to have somebody that's altruistic, like what Darren was in this case, to seek to do it not just for what we were getting from it, but for the good it did for others.
That's right.
So that makes it beneficial when you look at it, but without the subsidies for this type of a turbine, it's difficult to do. We have a couple that we're working on right now to support some people wanting to do it.
Okay.
And we're actually helping them with some consulting and advice on that. And the lead time from somebody saying, hey, I want to do a wind turbine, to somebody turning a wind turbine on, It can vary from 9 months to 5 years.
Wow.
Because it's all the planning, everybody wants to weigh numbers, everybody wants to see what the advantages are. It's a long planning cycle.
Well, hey, let's go see the wind turbine.
All right, let's go take a look at the wind
Okay.
turbine.
Wow, so here's the actual wind turbine. And if we look inside, you can see all of those bolts. What did you say, 28 feet underground? This goes?
This one here only goes about 10 foot. Thanks.
10 feet underground of cement, reinforcements, and reinforced concrete of it was a 28 foot by 28 foot pad spot. Because otherwise, all that wind pushing it, it's just gonna fall over. Who knew all the stuff you have to do underground to be able to make this actually work? All right. And can you?
This one here has the power cable coming down. That actually is will allow it to, it's just held by a hoisting grip on the top, freehand, which allows the unit to go through its yaw and make
nice.
5 rotations either way. As you'll actually see, if this sits here and makes it around 5 different times, one consecutive, it'll actually shut down. And you'll see
Oh,
out
because
here,
the wire will be
unwound
the wire. That is a good point. I'm glad someone thought of that. Can we look up inside?
Go ahead.
Man, can you believe it? I'm inside a windmill. All right.
It has a different partitions we climb. So you've got the same turns here.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, that's a bit of a climb up there. And I like the concept of how the cable just can twist.
It's just freehand.
Yeah. Inside a windmill, 120 feet,
120 foot to the turbine.
120 feet up, 70 foot diameter.
This one here is actually linked by fiber inside. We've got a PC set up inside that runs the reports and actually monitors it 24/7. An actual Northern Power actually reviews that information and they're monitoring it all the time also. So it is nice if they detect any vibrations, anything in there, and all various sensors on this, they'll contact us. So they can have the ability to shut it down if they see an
Oh, really?
issue. So it's,
All part of the smart grid.
yes.
Yeah. And 100,000 watts is right now coming through that cable.
Yes.
100 kilowatts. Really cool.
Generates power, but it
Yeah.